Hi, welcome to this free mini training on the 5 root causes of PMS and why PMS is not normal. I'm very excited about this and I'm very passionate about this. I have been working with women for years on hormone health after a very long journey of my own, which I'll get into around my own hormonal health. And this is something that I think just deserves so much more attention because women don't really realize that. Because PMS is so common and pretty much everyone we know has some type of symptom, we actually do have control over how it affects us. And in an optimal body, we don't have to be experiencing any PMS symptoms. That is not how our bodies are designed to feel each month, each cycle. So I'm really excited to give you guys some insight and some tools on how to address these symptoms from the root. So, what we're going to cover today is my intro and philosophy, a little bit about my backstory, why I'm so passionate about this work, and what this all means to me, the PMS myth. So, there's probably, like I mentioned, tons of different myths around PMS, like, oh, this is normal. Everyone goes through it. While that is true, the myth is that this is just something that women have to deal with. And we're kind of born into this curse of having to deal with PMS symptoms when we're of reproductive age. Then we're going to talk about what PMS is and what it isn't, kind of piggybacking off those myths and those truths. The top 5 root causes of PMS, we're really going to drill it down to what is causing your PMS because when you understand what causes your symptoms, you can then feel more empowered to change those symptoms because you understand there is a cause now, and those causes are within your control to some extent. So, we will talk all about that. And then we're going to talk about why the traditional method of spot treating symptoms fails. So maybe you have gone and seen a medical professional about your PMS symptoms, and maybe you're given a prescription that targets one little thing. Maybe it's a specific hormone in your body, like you have hypothyroidism and you're given a thyroid medication, and maybe it helps with that specific marker. But how do we address the symptoms in a way that it helps heal everything that we're feeling, all of those different PMS symptoms? Because it is a very beautifully orchestrated symphony when it comes to your hormones. And by addressing just one thing, we're missing out on a ton of other things. And there can also be a cascade effect where maybe we support one piece of the puzzle, but the rest of the puzzle kind of struggles because that symphony is no longer aligned. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll start to talk about how we can actually start to heal our PMS symptoms. So let's get into it. My story. My name is Kelsey Smigel. I'm a certified functional nutrition counselor with, like I said, a very strong passion for women's health. If you follow me on Instagram, you know. My mission is to create cycle literacy amongst women so that we're more body aware and able to advocate for ourselves in the health space. This is huge, huge, huge to me because majority of the women that I work with in my practice are women that have been aware of their health issues for a long time and have sought out medical help for a long time. And oftentimes they leave those settings feeling disempowered, misunderstood, misheard, like the testing isn't getting anywhere, like they've been given band-aids that aren't actually addressing the root cause. Something that's very common is women are just put on birth control to suppress these symptoms. And again, that's just a band-aid. So I really want to help women truly discover how they can understand what their symptoms mean and genuinely reverse them so that they don't have to worry about them again. And if and when they want to come off that pill or whatever band-aid they're on, they don't just revert back to the same issues that they had. So again, I want to help women learn how to understand their symptoms, track their cycles, and figure out what their bodies actually need to function optimally and feel their best. Because again, your natural state is to feel good all month. Yes, different parts of the cycle have different symptoms that are, to be expected. Maybe you have lower energy in the second half of your cycle after you ovulate. That's totally normal, but you shouldn't feel miserable and you shouldn't feel like a victim to your cycle. And based on almost every single woman I talk to, at some point we've all felt this dread leading up to our period and all of the things that come with that. And that should not be the case. We should not be suffering by nature. And so that is what I'm here to help you with today. a little bit about my story and why I'm so passionate about this. So, from the time I had my first period, which I think was age 13, up until a couple of years ago, I struggled with super irregular cycles. It would be anywhere between like 45 days to 90 days in length. Honestly, back then, it could have been diagnosed as PCOS. I never got an official diagnosis at the time, but to me, it's really not about the diagnosis. It's more about everyone's individual symptoms. And I struggled with severe hormonal acne flare-ups. Eventually, as this progressed, I would say I started to feel and I noticed this with a lot of clients as well. Maybe your first few cycles or when you're in high school, they feel okay. But as you get older and progressively have more cycles, they start to get a little more and more uncomfortable. And then suddenly you feel like you've reached a breaking point. Like, how did it get this bad? How do I need 7 Advils to not be dying from my cramps? And that's really common. And that's kind of my experience too, is I started to notice my PMS symptoms ramping up in college to where it was like, ooh, okay, this is kind of affecting my day now, to my first corporate job out of high school, which was stressful. I started to notice that I would describe my PMS symptoms as becoming debilitating, where I would start to have to take time off of work the first day of my period because my cramps were so, so bad. And literally, it got to the point where I was throwing up every time I had a cycle. And this progressively got worse and worse until a few years ago when I decided, okay, this can't be normal. The Advil is no longer working like it used to. Like I just kept taking more and more anti-inflammatories every time I had my cycle because I noticed, maybe one Advil used to do it, but now I have to take an alarming amount that is probably not recommended in order to feel okay and functional. And I was like, this just can't be how it's supposed to be. I also started to develop new symptoms that were really uncomfortable, like breast tenderness, which was really, really painful and started basically midway through my cycle. So I'd be dealing with that for 2 whole weeks. And yeah, painful cramps, low back pain kind of near my kidneys that started to develop as well. And it was starting to leave me really helpless. And I had even worked with some more holistic practitioners who would put me on some herbs. And while herbs can be so great and supportive, again, they're kind of just there to support you in the meantime. But when you go off of them, if you haven't implemented the tools to actually heal the root cause, you're going to go right back to where you were. So that was the place that I was in. And I realized something was seriously wrong, and I had to figure it out on my own because the conventional recommendation was just to keep taking these medications or go back on the pill. And I didn't want to go on the pill. My long-term goal was to become pregnant at some point in my life. And I thought, my period's not even regular. I don't even know when it's going to come. I don't know how to time things. I started to learn and understand that your your cycle health is indicative of your overall health. And so I knew that it also wasn't normal for my cycle to be this spaced out and this inconsistent in timing. And I really felt that was related to my PMS symptoms. And then fast forward even more, I go to school for functional nutrition and I see how all these puzzle pieces come together and make one big picture. And I thought, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. So I started to implement it on myself, and month over month, sure enough, I started to notice drastic improvements. And I could not believe it the first couple months where I did not have debilitating cramps during my period. It was insane to me because that's all I had known for, half my life at that point. And I think that's a really common story, or even if it's not your story, there are some relatable pieces that you can be like, yeah, I mean, same. I feel like so many women have something that they can relate to in this. And I just want to say, I see you. And this is why I'm so passionate about it, because when I discovered that I could nourish my body in a way that helped it truly reverse these symptoms, I was mind blown. And I'm like, why is no one talking about this? Why aren't doctors qualified to speak on this? And again, I think some doctors like are super great. I just they aren't educated on this. They help you with what they know. So their job is to help give you something that will give you immediate relief, whether it's a drug or whatever, but they are not certified in nutrition. And so when you put all those different modalities together and get a whole big picture, that's why we call it holistic health, you can start to see how you can actually address everything from one place. So let's talk about the PMS myths. And well, it's really just one myth. And that is that PMS is normal. Again, I've already touched on this, but because, especially in Western society, it feels like every woman we know of reproductive age struggles with PMS. And, we go to the doctors and we're like, oh, we have cramps during our period. And they might be like, yeah, that's normal. Um, I just like to point out that normal does not equal common, as you'll see on my second bullet. Normal does not equal common, and normal is not optimal either. So just because everyone is experiencing a symptom does not mean that that is your body's natural state. So it might feel like that because that's what we're exposed to. Even on social media, people are normalizing bloating and PMS and all of that, which I think it's important to talk about, of course. But I don't want to overlook the fact that that is not how our bodies are supposed to feel. And it is a result of the times we live in. It's a result of, a lot of the things that we're exposed to in modern society, whether it's exogenous hormones, there's estrogens in the plastics that we use, and we're just more stressed as a population these days, which can also take a toll on hormones. It's kind of the perfect storm of just the way our society is right now, especially in Western culture, that creates these conditions for PMS to develop and be incredibly widespread and incredibly common. So an optimally functioning body clears and processes excess toxins, has all of its nutritional needs met, and is free of pain and inflammation. I want you to just sit with that for a second because you don't have to have pain and inflammation every single month. If you're meeting your body's needs, then you won't feel those things. I like to describe PMS symptoms to my client as a check engine light, whatever symptom it is. Again, as long as it's not just like the standard, I'm a little bit tired. There's different levels too. There's scales, right? So if you're incredibly exhausted, having incredibly dominating cravings that you can't control, even those are check engine lights that are like, hey, Kelsey, or whatever, insert your name, there's something going on that you might want to look into because things are not perfectly balanced right now. And again, doctors are not trained in nutrition and lifestyle interventions. That's not their faults, right? They go to school for years and years and years to hone their craft in medicine. But there are other pieces of the puzzle that are being completely overlooked when we only seek out medical help. And that is the nutrition and lifestyle aspect of it. They might be able to give you very general recommendations like, oh, work on your stress, make sure you eat a healthy diet. But what does that mean? Because everyone's situation is so different, and you have to look at the specific symptoms of each individual to know what the exact approach should be to heal those symptoms. So, what is PMS really? What it is, like I just said, is a signal from the body that something needs support, not suppression. Say you're having really bad cramps. So, support would be, whoa, what does my body need to not be in this state of stress and inflammation? Maybe that's extra magnesium because when we lose our blood during our period, we lose nutrients and minerals like iron, magnesium, and sometimes when we replenish with those things, we actually start to feel a lot better because that's just what our bodies needed. But an example of suppression would be popping that Advil, like we're so used to doing. And that's just muffling that signal. That's like if I had that check engine light come on in my car and I turned it off and I was like, that's a later problem. Like, I don't want to deal with that right now. That's not going to fix the issue. In fact, the issue is going to persist and get worse and worse behind the scenes. So the second bullet is it's often rooted in nutrition depletion, inflammation, or nervous system dysregulation. So this has to do with how we're nourishing our bodies. Inflammation and nervous system regulation all have to do with stress. So if there are outside factors affecting our body or we're not getting the inputs that we need, we will also experience these symptoms. PMS is also reversible when the root causes are addressed. So again, I want you to know you can reverse your symptoms. You can feel better. And most people don't know that. They don't know that. What PMS is not. PMS is not just part of being a woman or something to normalize because like I said, if you look at other cultures throughout the world too, this might be a widespread issue here, but other cultures who just have a different way of life, they aren't experiencing it to the same degree that we are. So I just want you to know that that is not your natural state as a woman to have this dreadful experience once a month, every month. It's not caused by hormones being bad or broken. Again, it just means that we need to support it more than we are now. We need to support it differently. It's not something that only needs medication or birth control to manage. Like I talked about, there's a lot of other things you can do to support your body, actually in a much more supportive way than just taking these band-aid approaches. And it's not inevitable or permanent at all. I am a true example of that. I thought I had probably the worst PMS of anyone I knew. And I'm standing here today, actually in my 9th month of pregnancy, which I didn't know if I would ever get to because of how crazy my hormones were. And towards the end, of being not pregnant and trying to conceive, I had experienced several cycles that were completely symptom-free. So, what are the root causes of PMS that I kind of alluded to previously? Number one is excess estrogen and liver overload. This is huge, and this is a byproduct of our society. Like I mentioned, we are exposed to so many compounds that can disrupt our hormones, whether it's in plastics or personal care products or even just in the environment. And that, we have natural estrogen in our bodies. That's great. But when we have disproportionately higher estrogen than our other hormones, that symphony, that beautifully orchestrated symphony that is so particular and needs to be so balanced, gets thrown off. And the way that our body usually regulates the symphony and makes sure that the estrogen stays at the perfect level is through your liver. Your liver detoxes the estrogen once it uses it. So at the time in your cycle when your estrogen is highest, your body will then basically help eliminate the excess afterwards. And then you recalibrate, you rebalance for the second half of your cycle. But what happens is also because of all of the different medications most people are on these days, and also just like the environmental burden that I mentioned, all of the toxins and everything we're exposed to in our foods, processed foods, things like that, our livers aren't getting the same love that they used to. Our livers are overburdened. And if we don't intentionally support our livers with nutrition and different lifestyle interventions, they are not going to be able to do their job of regulating those estrogen levels. So, high estrogen is very closely tied to those classic symptoms like breast tenderness, cramps, all of that. And I would say more often than not in my practice, I see women with high estrogen. And this doesn't mean that your estrogen is necessarily going to come up high on a blood test. You might be thinking, oh, can't I just test for that? It's all about how high it is in relation to your other hormones. So it's not just a matter of like looking at a lab result and seeing if it's high or low. It, again, is part of a very complex system where everything has to be in the correct ratios. So that's why that's kind of a limited view when we do go to doctors sometimes and they're like, oh, everything looks normal. It's like, okay, I don't feel normal. That's not matching up. And that could be because those ratios are off and we're not looking at all of the hormones and how they all play together. The second root cause is low or poorly utilized progesterone. So this goes back to that same example I just said about your hormones being in the perfect ratio with one another. So a lot of people not only have high estrogen, but their estrogen actually might be at what's considered a normal level, but it's too high compared to where their progesterone is. So maybe their progesterone is too low, or maybe it's a combination of both. They have a bit too high of estrogen and their progesterone is too low. So most commonly, I see both in my clients, and we tend to work on both and attack it from all ends. And there's a lot that can affect your body's ability to produce progesterone. Progesterone is incredibly important for ovulation, and ovulation is one of the biggest components of our cycle that can indicate your overall health. So, things like stress. You might be familiar with the hormone cortisol. Cortisol and progesterone have the same parent hormone. So the same starter hormone that can either break off and turn into progesterone or break off and turn into cortisol, that stress hormone, is at play here. And when your body is under chronic stress, whether it's mental, physical, you're just doing too much, even if you don't feel mentally stressed, most of us in today's society just have a lot going on and it's crazy, then your body's going to prioritize making cortisol over progesterone. And so that can lead to low progesterone. Things like not getting enough potassium in your diet. There's a lot of reasons for this progesterone depletion. I would say one of the biggest ones is stress for sure. And that can make your progesterone lower, therefore making the imbalance with your estrogen even greater. The gap is even bigger than it should be. So that is another root cause. The third one is blood sugar instability. Blood sugar, I wish people knew more how closely tied blood sugar regulation is to your hormonal health. It is truly so foundational. So when we learn how to balance our blood sugar on our own, I know there's lots of solutions out there now, lots of drugs, which is great for certain instances and certain individuals. But what I feel like is missing is the education on how you can try to do that yourself first. There's so many things you can do to balance your blood sugar, and it's actually really simple. A matter of getting enough protein for your needs, spacing it out throughout the day, the way that you eat is actually almost more important than what exactly you're eating. And this is something I work extensively, if not the most, with my clients on, regardless of any of their health symptoms. I think blood sugar is almost foundational to everything. So when you start to master eating in a way to support your blood sugar, which again, very simple, very foundational, you can start to see drastic improvements in your cycle. And this is probably the one thing that moved the needle the most for me in my own hormone journey. Number four is chronic stress and HPA axis dysfunction. So again, I kind of talked about this with the progesterone. Chronic stress is super depleting for the body and causes inflammation in the body. And so again, there are so many different types of stress. You might be like, I'm not mentally stressed. I'm a pretty chill person. But are you running around doing a million things a day? Are you recovering and resting enough? Is your mind constantly racing? Is your Apple Watch like, hey, your resting heart rate's pretty high normally? Are you doing really intense workouts every single day of the month? Because some phases of our menstrual cycle are not designed for us to be doing HIIT workouts. That's actually a big stress on our body for certain phases of our cycle. So all of these different things can play into chronic stress and therefore affect our hormones. And as you'll see, I'm talking about root causes here, but truly, all of these are still intertwined. Again, chronic stress can be related to you having poorly utilized progesterone or low progesterone. And blood sugar instability can also be playing a part in creating extra cortisol and chronic stress in your body. Number five is micronutrient depletion, especially magnesium, B6, and zinc. And again, I just want to point out stress can deplete nutrients from your body. Stress especially depletes magnesium. Majority of people in our society are deficient in magnesium. Majority of people, almost everyone can benefit from supplementing with magnesium. Now, there's certain kinds of magnesium you want to supplement with, so don't just go out and buy that calm drink or anything you see. But it is really important to understand that there's a lot you can do from a nutritional perspective to help support those gaps and help heal that root cause. So even though we're talking root causes here, something I want to point out is, again, there's a lot of overlap. So you're probably like, okay, what do I do from here? I don't really know. Like several of these feel like they pertain to me. Where do I go from here? It's all about distilling it down even further and addressing the soil, your body's internal environment. So if you think about your PMS symptoms as the branches of a tree, they're up here. You have cramps, you have spotting, you have breast tenderness. Those are all individual little symptoms, these leaves. And what we're used to doing is kind of like looking at each of them and trying to address the leaf. We're like snipping off the dead leaf. But does that actually stop the tree from dying? No, there's just going to be more dead leaves that pop up. Like more of the leaves are going to die off, and you're never going to have a healthy tree, right? Because the health of the tree is in the roots. So we need to look at these roots. These are the roots, right? These five things are the most important roots. But what affects these roots? Let's go down even further. And that would be the health of the soil. If this tree, this deciduous tree, if you will, is living in the desert, it's not getting what it needs in the soil in order to be healthy and thriving. No way, it's going to die. That's why these types of trees don't even exist in the desert. If you put this tree in a super fertile soil near a river and it's got super diverse critters and microbiota and it's super healthy, the roots are going to be nourished. And then the tree and its branches and leaves are going to be nourished. So, yes, we've identified the root causes, but the way to actually heal these roots is to heal the soil. And healing the soil is actually pretty straightforward and pretty simple. And when you heal the soil, it will address every single one of these things. So, it's not as complicated as it sounds. I break down these root causes so that you can see, you can kind of start to understand the different scientific elements at play here from a more, I don't know, technical standpoint. But the actual healing work involved is not that complicated. So I just want you to feel empowered by that if this slide looks overwhelming at all. So, just to recap, spot treating PMS with band-aid solutions like Advil may offer short-term relief, but it rarely creates lasting change. PMS is a signal, not an isolated problem, and until the root systems that support hormone balance, including blood sugar, stress response, nutrient status, and detox pathways, are addressed, symptoms will continue to return in new or familiar ways, and you're really not addressing the root. So, just keep that in mind. Now, where do you go from here? I have poured my heart and soul throughout the past, oh my gosh, 8, 9 months into creating a resource for you. I wanted to make this really accessible. I know not everybody has the resources to work one-on-one with a practitioner like myself, but I'm so passionate about educating women on this that I wanted to make something very simple and strategic, but also really comprehensive for you to follow. So I've created an over 50-page ebook to help you start healing your PMS symptoms today. And I'm just like really excited about it because this is the exact roadmap that I wish I had had years ago when I felt unseen, unheard, helpless, like my PMS symptoms were ruling my life. Like I had to plan every single part of my social life, my work life around my period. And I have laid it out all for you, like as clearly as I possibly could. It's exactly what I wish I had. So it is basically a blueprint. We go much more into depth on these 5 root causes so you can understand each root cause, the different ways to support those root causes, and different products that I recommend, supplements that I recommend, and lifestyle practices to help you address that root cause. But then also, we talk about the major things that will help move the needle overall. And we talk about immediate support. So, again, I know that sometimes it's like, yeah, it's great to work on healing the root cause, but that can be overwhelming and it can take time to build those habits. And hormones are typically pretty slow to respond to the changes that you put in now. So that means that the work you put in now, you may not see as relief in your symptoms until a few cycles down the road. So I also include some recommendations for more natural, immediate support, how you can start to feel better with your next period while you're working on laying the groundwork of healing those roots. And we also talk about, we have a complete overview of your menstrual cycle. So it talks about the different major hormones at play, what they're doing each part of the month. I think most people don't realize that their cycle is actually 4 phases. So you have your follicular phase, you have ovulation, you have your luteal phase, and then you have your period. Most people are just like, oh, there's my period, and then there's not my period. And again, we just don't get educated on this. It's not our faults, but that is why I want to show you what to expect in each phase of that cycle and what actually is normal for each phase. I mentioned earlier your luteal phase. It's actually very normal and natural for your body to feel a bit more tired. And I kind of break down the why behind that. And there's no more chasing down every symptom individually. Again, we're going to learn how to address the big picture so that you don't have to worry about trimming each of those leaves as they crop up, because that is very overwhelming, very draining, and it doesn't work. And you're going to walk away knowing exactly what to focus on first. I really break down like a timeline of what to expect, how to get started implementing things, what's going to move the needle the most. And it is my pride and joy because I have tried to make it so clear because genuinely just like my biggest mission in this life is to help women understand they have so much more power over how they feel. You have so much more power over how you feel. You do not have to be helpless. You do not have to feel like a victim to this every single month. And it's just, it breaks my heart that these aren't conversations that we're having in health class in high school, to be quite honest. So consider this your health education as a woman of reproductive age or a person of reproductive age with a cycle. And I I just want you to feel better. So let's stay in touch. If you have any questions at all about this, I will try to get back to you. If I'm not on maternity leave at the time, please feel free to drop your questions below or email me directly at encompass.with.kelsey@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at encompass.holistic.health. I love sending voice notes back and forth with people if it's a more complicated question. So again, if I'm not on maternity leave yet, I will happily answer you there. Or if you're seeing this and asking me when I get back, I'll also respond to you then. You can also feel free to check out my website for more about my approach to healing. That's encompass-holistic-health.com. And if you want to get access to this ebook that I am launching as I'm recording this video, the link is below. Again, I'm trying to make it a very accessible price for everybody because I just think everybody deserves to have this information. So my goal here is not to like scam you or sell you on something that you don't need. Genuinely, I just poured my heart and soul into creating a resource that I think will be so helpful for you. And I hope you really benefit from it. So please reach out if you have any questions. Thank you so much for taking the time to invest in learning more about your body and your hormones. I really hope that you even gained some deeper insight just from this short training. And I really wish you the best on your healing journey. So please keep in touch if you read the ebook or if you take anything away from this training and you start to implement it, tag me on social. I want to see your improvements. Nothing brings me more joy than hearing how women are starting to take back their power and heal their hormones. So thanks again for joining.